You've never seen that globe from that perspective, from that far away, ever in your life. Yet when I say Earth, you picture a ball. Learning perspective really is the most important thing to realize you live on a flat plane. They don't teach you perspective in schools. The only people that learn perspective are artists and like architects. They don't teach this to the common person. Why do you think that is? They don't want you to understand how your senses work. They want to keep you as dumbed down and as uninformed as humanly possible. This makes it easier to control you. They want you to deny your own senses, deny all common sense, and then put your faith in them. Trust them. Trust the experts. They know better. They're smarter than you. You're dumb. They're smart. Trust them. The Matrix relies on this type of thinking. They don't want people to be able to critically think for themselves. So let's begin by looking at this perspective diagram. As you can see, all these horizontal parallel lines all converge at the vanishing point on the horizon as they get further away from the observer. So the lines that are below us appear to go up in the frame as they get further away, and the lines that are above us appear to go down in the frame as they get further away. This is similar to what it would look like if you were looking down a long hallway. When you look at this picture of a hallway, we know that both the walls are parallel with one another. And we know that the floor and the ceiling are also parallel with each other. But our eyes do not see them that way. Our eyes converge them all at the horizon. So this is a first-person perspective. Okay, you are the observer in this picture. But let's take a look at what this would look like from a side angle. All the horizontal lines that are visually parallel, they all visually intersect at the horizon. Okay? So it forms a right triangle here, with the horizontal line being at eye level, and the hypotenuse is the ground. It appears to go up to the vanishing point, to the horizon, which is right here. So we know that all these horizontal lines converge at the horizon, and they will radiate out of the horizon. All these radiating lines are actually parallel, but our eyes don't see them that way. So a lot of these flat earth debunkers, they make side view illustrations that show these horizontal lines parallel, like this, when they should be making their illustrations like this. The higher up the horizontal parallel line, the steeper the angle at which it converges at the horizon. Okay? So notice how we have a red solid line as the ground. You can't see through the ground. The ground is a true limit. So these radiating lines here, they stop at the ground. But in an upwards direction, all these horizontal parallel lines radiating out of the horizon, they continue to go. There's no limit in an upward direction. That's why I've continued these lines. So the higher up the parallel horizontal line, the steeper it converges at the horizon, at the vanishing point. Now also, a lot of flat earth debunkers, they try to say the sun would never set on a flat earth, and they create side view illustrations like this. And they say, look, this is the angle at which the observer would see the sun, and at no point will the sun ever fall below the ground. And they say the same things for objects on the ground that are moving further away. They say the boat will never vanish beyond the horizon. But this type of side view illustration is completely wrong. You need to converge your ceiling with your floor at eye level. So it wouldn't look like this. These horizontal lines wouldn't look like this, and you wouldn't be viewing the sun and the objects on the ground like this. What actually happens is it all converges at the horizon. So this is a much more accurate and factual side view illustration. And when Cash is looking at the sun, this is the angle in which he looks at the sun. And when he's looking at objects get further away from the ground, this is the angle in which he would look to see those objects on the ground. Okay, so most flat earth debunkers get this completely wrong. Now we know all the horizontal lines converge at the horizon, including the ground. Now I've continued the ground in this illustration so that I can make a point. Because if these lines are all converging after the horizon, let's pretend like they diverge, right? Theoretically. So I've continued the ground. Now, if there was a boat sailing away from Cash, when it's closer, he's going to be looking slightly down to see it. And as it gets further away, he needs to look a little further up, and a little further up, and then a little further up. When the boat gets the same distance away from the observer as the distance to the horizon is, Cash will be looking 0 degrees, completely horizontal and parallel with the ground. He'll be looking straight ahead. Now, what if the boat gets a further distance away from the observer than the distance to the horizon? What if the boat got to here? Well, now Cash would have to look in an upwards direction to see something that we know is below him. It's not possible. It doesn't work. Now, you can only see the face of the ground up until your horizon. You can't see the face of the ground past the horizon. Okay? Cash can't see the ground from here to here, but he could see things that are above the ground for a little bit past the horizon. That's another function. The higher an object is above the ground, the further you can see it past the horizon. But you can't see the ground past the horizon. So if the boat was a little bit past the horizon, but had about 10, 20 feet of height on these sails, this is what Cash would see. Now, if the boat got even further away, Cash would have to look at an even greater upwards angle to see something that is below him. And at this point, that ship's not even possible to see. This is what Cash would see. Nothing. It's past the horizon. Now, the same thing happens with the sun. Let's pretend like this top parallel horizontal line is the path of the sun. Cash is going to be looking this way. Then he's going to look a little further down, a little further down, and then a little further down. Now, when the sun is at the horizon right here, this is what Cash is going to see. And if the sun gets even further past the horizon, see how he has to look down to see something that we know is up? And he's being forced to look through this solid red line, which represents the ground, which is not transparent. Cash can't see through the ground. It doesn't work. This is what Cash would see. The sun will have set. This is what Cash sees as the sun sets. The only other real difference between perspective on a ball and perspective on a plane is that on a ball, the higher up you go, the further down you would have to look to see your horizon. The horizon would fall, or it would appear to fall, as you went up. The buildings are going to have a slight tilt to them. They're not going to appear vertical and parallel. That's the big difference between perspective on a ball and perspective on a plane. We never see these buildings tilting over. We never see a boat tilt over. We just see them bottom out, but they remain completely vertical. So as you can see, these objects in the distance aren't leaned over, they're not slanted, they're just obscured by the horizon because they're a further distance away than the horizon is, so they appear to bottom out. They're not leaning over. If you think that if you keep going one direction, you'll just end up back in the same place and that there's a finite amount of land and it's all been discovered, you won't go and try to discover more land. It's a trap. It's a very effective way of keeping the herd contained. How does the Earth orbit the sun? It's the sun's gravity. Why do we stick to the ball Earth? The Earth's gravity. Why doesn't the water fly off a ball that's spinning 1,000 miles an hour? Gravity. Why does the moon orbit the Earth? Gravity. What causes the tides? The moon's gravity. The moon's gravity overtakes the Earth's gravity. If the Earth spun 360 degrees every 24 hours, that day and night would gradually shift and flip every 6 months. as the Earth gets to the other side of the sun. Noon would become nighttime and midnight would become daytime. This is a fact. And the experts don't deny that this phenomenon would happen if the Earth spun 360 degrees every 24 hours. But what they claim is that the Earth spins 361 degrees every 24 hours. And that the Earth only spins 360 degrees in 23 hours, 56 minutes, and 4 seconds. This extra 1 degree of spin every day makes up for the roughly 1 degree of orbit, keeping noon facing the sun at all times, preventing the day-night switch that I explained in my last video from happening. Now, this official explanation makes sense, and the logic is all sound, but there's still one gaping hole with this model, and that's the fact that Polaris never moves. Polaris is located over the North Pole every single day of the year, which means the North Pole points to Polaris in December, and the North Pole points to Polaris in June. Every day of the year, the North Pole will point to Polaris. And the major problem with this is the North Pole in June and the North Pole in December are separated by roughly 186 million miles, as they are on opposite sides of the sun. So if the Earth is tilted 23.5 degrees in December and the Earth is tilted 23.5 degrees in June, and these two poles are separated by 186 million miles, how do they both point to the same star? This is essentially claiming that the North Pole in June, the North Pole in December, and Polaris form a triangle. But triangles can't have two parallel lines. Their explanation for a lack of a stellar parallax with Polaris is that Polaris is really far away. In fact, Polaris is over 2.55 quadrillion miles away. It's so far away that there's absolutely no detectable parallax between the Earth in June and the Earth in December, which is separated by 186 million miles. How come I can see it? Oh, well, that's because Polaris is really freaking big. Polaris is 46 times the size of the sun, and the sun is over 1 million times the size of the Earth. Every explanation has to be reverse engineered because they started with an ultimate goal of placing the sun at the center. Every other fact that they create is reverse engineered to make this work. It's just like George Orwell said in his book 1984. The stars can be near or distant according as we need them. Do you think it's beyond our mathematicians to create a dual system of astronomy? This is exactly what happened in reality. All these men that we learned about who created the heliocentric model, they had to work collectively over the span of 2,000 years to reverse engineer this model. This model comes from man. This model is built on perfected mathematics that has no relation to reality, no relation to the truth. It's simply a reverse engineered masterpiece. Everything with this model has been reverse engineered from the truth. The ultimate goal from the beginning was to place the sun at the center of the universe. They want the sun at the center, as they are sun worshippers. Heliocentrism is simply modern day sun worship masquerading as a science. So their goal from the beginning was to put the sun at the center.